I show up for my family. I breathe deep. I move. I check my blood pressure to reduce my risk. I hope my kids think I'm supermom. But if 1 in 5 women will have a stroke, my real superpower is prevention. I rise for tomorrow by defeating stroke today.
You might not think you're at risk for stroke, but anyone can have a stroke. No matter your age, gender, or race, stroke can strike at any time. It's important to know what to look for in case of stroke. Use FAST to remember the warning signs of stroke. F is for face, A is for arms, S is for speech, T is for time.
Sometimes stress feels like the only constant, and I know that stress may lead to heart disease and stroke. So today I decided to put my phone down and simply breathe. I'm focusing on what I can control, like turning little moments into me time to help my mind, heart, and body. I'm reclaiming my time. Deep breaths for just 1 minute, a walk with my dog, or calling a friend. This is my time and my health, and moment by moment, I'm owning it.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. High blood pressure silently affects millions of Americans. Staying on top of your blood pressure is as simple as these 4 easy steps. Self-monitoring is power. Visit manageyourbp.org to learn more.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final webinar of the Check It Community Conversation Series, How to Get Healthy Sleep and Well-Being. I'm Sabrina Dami. I am a news anchor with News Channel 13, the NBC station here in Albany, New York. I've been here for nearly 18 years, a proud Syracuse graduate, and honored to have emceed the Go Red for Women luncheon of the Capital Region several times now. And every time I go, I learn something new about health and well-being and how to live a healthy lifestyle, and the different wonderful healthcare professionals who we interact with remind me of certain things I should do as someone who has worked the overnight shift for a decade. I am really looking forward to this conversation today and different things that we all can take away from it to impart in our own lives with running around with kids, with managing careers, and how we can make sure we get the proper sleep so we can live our healthiest life. The annual Check It Challenge is a free evidence-based wellness and blood pressure management program that focuses on improving your health by making simple changes to prevent and manage high blood pressure. Throughout the past 4 months, we've been talking about understanding your numbers, making small changes to make big improvements based on life's essential 8. We're going to get more into that a little later in our event today. If you've missed any of the American Heart Association resources or you want to go back and review the content, you can go to the website www.heart.org/checkitny. The Check It Challenge would not be possible each year without the support of our generous sponsors, and you see those names on your screen right now. Thank you to Matthews Auto, Broadview Federal Credit Union, Baxter, the Kinney Drugs Foundation, and media sponsor CNY Latino. Some quick housekeeping to get to. We're going to keep everyone muted today, but we'd like to know who is joining. So in the chat box, please let us know your name, where you're watching from, what organization you are with, and also be sure to select everyone so that we can all see the information. We will use the chat box for questions throughout the session. And while our panelists are speaking, feel free to put your questions in that chat box. We'll hold off on sharing them with the entire group until the Q&A session right at the end. And if you need any assistance, just raise your hand, use the raise my hand function at the bottom of your screen, and an American Heart Association staff member will connect with you and help you out. As a reminder, this is a public event, so please avoid disclosing any personal medical information when using that chat box feature. We are recording the session today, so it'll be available on the Check It Challenge website, American Heart Association New York State Facebook page, event page, and the American Heart Association's Eastern States YouTube channel approximately 2 days after this webinar ends. Your one-time registration gives you access to all of the past recordings and resources on the event website. And again, that website is www.heart.org/checkitny. If you're using social media to post anything about the session today, please use the handles @AHA New York or #CheckIt. You can see that on your screen right now. So that is it for the housekeeping announcements. Let's get right to our panel and bring in our first guest, Dr. Noor Makaram. Dr. Makaram is an assistant professor of epidemiology at the Columbia University Irving Medical Center's Mailman School of Public Health. She is a cardiovascular epidemiologist with an NIH and American Heart Association funded research program focused on cardiovascular disease prevention through lifestyle change. Dr. Makaram leads several studies addressing the role of multidimensional sleep health as a cardiovascular health metric for heart disease prevention. The goal of her research is to improve cardiovascular disease risk prediction and inform precision behavioral interventions to promote cardiovascular health equality and equity. She has been an American Heart Association volunteer since 2016, serving on scientific council committees at the national levels, as well as working on educational and community initiatives in New York City. She has received several American Heart Association awards, including the Trudy Bush Award for Cardiovascular Disease Research in Women's Health and the Lifestyle Cardiometabolic Health Investigator Award. So Dr. Makaram, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your expertise and your knowledge. And I want to start with asking just your overall take on having sleep added as a life's essential 8, one of the key measures to improve and maintain good cardiovascular health. What is your take on adding sleep to that?
Hi, Sabrina, and hi, everyone. Really excited to be here and really excited that sleep was added as the 8th metric of cardiovascular health. You know, this edition acknowledges decades of science showing that sleep is associated with developing heart disease and its risk factors. And in my research, we've shown that poor sleep is related to increases the risk of developing obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. And we also conducted the first study to show that the addition of sleep as an 8th metric of heart health improves our ability to predict future risk of heart disease over and above the original 7 metrics. So in our study, we showed that an enhanced heart health score that includes the original LifeSimple 7 plus sleep was more strongly associated with future risk of heart disease than the original LifeSimple 7 score. And so this research was cited in the AHA Presidential Advisory on Life's Essential 8 and undoubtedly contributed to the addition of sleep to the Life's Essential 8. Now, I want to note that this 8th metric of cardiovascular health, sleep, focuses primarily on sleep duration, which is the most widely studied aspect of sleep and has been strongly related to heart disease risk. In particular, the recommendation is that adults should be sleeping 7 or more hours every night, but less than 9 hours. Indeed, research shows that for every 1 hour per night decrease in sleep duration below this recommended 7 to 8 hours, heart disease risk increases by 6%. And on the other hand, for every 1 hour per night increase in sleep duration above the recommended 7 to 8 hours a night, heart disease risk increases by 12%, which is really, meaningful. But I did want to note that even though sleep duration is super important and we should all focus on getting enough sleep, it's important to remember that sleep health is multidimensional. I like to compare how we think about sleep to how we should think about sleep, I should say, to how we think about diet. When we think about our diet, we don't just think about, for example, our intake of vegetables. We think about our diet as a whole, our intake of fruit, vegetables, grains, etc. Similarly, when we think about sleep, we shouldn't just focus only on our sleep duration. We should focus on our overall sleep health, and we should improve multiple aspects of our sleep in order to, get the most benefits for our heart health. So I would say, in addition to sleep duration, we should focus on improving our sleep quality. the efficiency of our sleep, which refers to the percentage of time in bed we actually spend sleeping. Of course, we want that percentage to be higher. And our sleep regularity. You know, there's been a lot of recent science showing that keeping a fixed sleep schedule, so going to bed at the same time every day and waking up at the same time in the morning and day to day and also on weekdays and weekends, can really protect from heart disease. And also, honestly, even subjective measures of our sleep, like how satisfied we are with our sleep and our daytime, our alertness in the daytime, have also independently been linked to our future risk of heart disease. So kind of adopting this holistic vision of our sleep health.
You touched on this a little bit, and I want to dive into this a little bit more. Sleep patterns, duration of sleep. You know, a lot of people are shift workers. They're trying to catch a nap whenever they can. And I put myself in that category. For 10 years, I worked the overnight shift here at News Channel 13, and I would wake up around 1 a.m. and I would get up, rush into work, get home around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I would split sleep. I would get 3 hours, wake up, pick up my daughter, get another 3 hours. So talk about the effects that can have long-term, and is that enough? If it's broken up 7 hours, is that still enough for us?
That's a great question. So I will say that, you know, one really nice thing about the Essential 8 is that they recognize that all these metrics are essential, but they're not simple. So as you pointed out, it's not always simple to kind of meet all these metrics, including for sleep. So I will say that unfortunately, shift work is definitely a risk factor for hypertension and for heart disease, particularly night shift work and rotating shift work. So people who have varying schedules throughout the week. And in fact, there's, you know, a term, it's called shift work disorder, which refers to, you know, this persistent sleep disturbance and the excessive sleepiness that people who engage in this type of shift work feel. And this is, you know, strongly associated with some of the, you know, psychosocial risk factors for heart disease, like depression and stress. It's related to irregular lifestyle behaviors. So, you know, irregular eating patterns, irregular sleep patterns, irregular activity patterns, which can disrupt really the circadian rhythm of our body and predispose to hypertension and heart disease. Now, the good news, I will say, is that sleep is multidimensional. So, you know, and so we should recognize that progress is better than perfect. So someone who engages, for example, in rotating shift work, it may not be possible for them to go to bed and wake up at the same time every day just because of the nature of their work. So they may not have regular sleep. So in this instance, what someone who engages in rotating shift work should focus on is maybe improving their sleep duration and quality. So focusing on, when you do get the chance to sleep, to get enough sleep and to get high quality sleep. And so one way to do this is to focus on what we call practicing good sleep hygiene, which refers to the sleep habits, behaviors, and the sleep environment that put us in the best position to sleep well every night. So some tips for that would include, for example, to optimize our sleep environment, making sure that, you know, our mattress, pillow, bedding is comfortable, that the temperature in the bedroom suits our preferences, but usually a cooler temperature between 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit seems to promote more restful sleep. Making sure that we block out sources of light when we want to sleep, so heavy curtains, eye masks, and avoiding sources of bright light right before we want to sleep. So I know this can be a challenge for many, but avoiding our phones and our laptops before we go to sleep, because this light can signal to our brain that it's time to be awake when actually we're trying to sleep. And also drowning out noise, so using things like earplugs, fans, or white noise machines. And I would say, in addition to optimizing the sleep environment, regardless of your schedule, give yourself enough time to sleep. Sleep is the first thing that busy people squeeze out of their schedules to socialize or to, you know, to catch up on work. And it may be tempting to do that. But it's important to treat sleep as a priority and to remember that your heart is a muscle. So just like all the other muscles in your body, your heart needs to kind of have this time to relax, to rejuvenate, and sleep gives your heart this chance to recover and to function optimally. So there's other, tips that, can also help with sleep relating to your habits. So, recognizing that good sleep begins when we wake up in the morning. I know this seems counterintuitive, or when you wake up, if you're a shift worker, it's not always in the morning, but making sure to be active when you're awake, making sure to get some sunshine during the daytime. And then when it's time to sleep, make sure that you have a winding down routine, which involves, taking a hot bath or, reading a book, but not doing any work or paying bills while you're in bed, to build this connection in your mind between the bedroom and sleep.
That's such a good point that you bring up, because I think a lot of times we focus on routine more for children to get them, in the mindset for sleep. We don't do that enough for ourselves. For adults, follow this pattern each night that almost convinces your mind, hey, it's time to shut down.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I will say one more thing, is I know a lot of shift workers tend to nap a lot. I will say that it's okay to take a 20 to 30-minute nap, like a power nap, to just feel rejuvenated. But too many naps, or naps close to the main sleep period, can actually disrupt our usual sleep. So it's also important to pay attention to that.
What about the difference between men and women? Is there a difference in terms of sleep quality and the lack of getting enough of it, and how that impacts us differently?
So I think the first thing that I want to say before I answer this question is that poor sleep is a risk factor for heart disease for everybody. So everybody in all age groups, both men and women, should be focusing on having good sleep health to promote good heart health. Now, in terms of if there are some sex differences, I will say that there is some research showing that sleep may impact men and women differently. So, for example, some studies suggest that women may be more prone to the cardiovascular consequences of poor sleep. I know that in a recent study that we published at Columbia using nationally representative data, we show that the associations between poor overall sleep health and risk for and odds of having hypertension or heart disease may be stronger in women compared to men. It's also important to remember that, women, of course, experience the menopausal transition, and that can also, predispose them to sleep problems. And women tend to have a higher prevalence of some of the psychosocial risk factors for poor sleep. So things like depression, stress, and of course, caregiving strain is huge in women, particularly, women with children, and that can predispose them to poor sleep. And then, the downstream effects on heart disease risk. But I do want to say that, this is when we talk maybe more about sleep behaviors or habits. But when we think about sleep disorders, which I think other panelists will talk about more in detail, we also see differences between men and women. Women are more prone to insomnia, which is difficulty falling asleep, whereas men seem to have a higher occurrence of sleep apnea, which is another sleep disorder that predisposes to hypertension and heart disease. So there are also differences in sleep disorders. The last thing.
I'm just on what you just said. Why is that? Why are there different sleep disorders that affect men and women differently?
There's just I'm not sure exactly the mechanisms that underlie these associations, but generally women are 40% more likely than men to have signs and symptoms of insomnia. So they just tend to have more difficulty falling asleep. And it could be in part because of the psychosocial risk factors that I discussed. Also, the menopausal transition is associated with more insomnia. In men, there is there is sleep apnea, of course, in both men and women, particularly in midlife. We start to see a higher prevalence of, sleep apnea. But men, it seems to be occur more in men compared to women, and so it can probably contribute more to the heart disease burden among men. I will say that one point I wanted to make, related to your question about children and adolescents, is that I think a really important point is that we now know that the risk for heart disease starts to kind of build and accumulate from childhood, which is why the Life Essential 8 guidelines now acknowledge this. And we see now guidelines for individuals aged 2+ years. Before, they were just for adults, and now the guidelines span the entire life course. And related to sleep, studies show that actually adolescents who don't get enough sleep and who have poor quality sleep, compared to well-rested kids, they tend to have higher blood pressure, they tend to have higher body weight, bigger waistlines, and lower levels of HDL cholesterol, or the good cholesterol. And this can really set them up for having higher risk of heart disease in adulthood. So it's really important to start kind of building those healthy sleep habits really early on in life to set ourselves up for better heart health in adulthood. And I want to note that sleep requirements for the body vary over life. So for in adults, the recommendation is 7 or more hours a night, but less than 9 hours. It's important to remember that for school-age children, so between 6 to 12 years, the recommendation is actually 9 to 12 hours of sleep, whereas teenagers between 13 and 18 years actually need about 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So they actually need more sleep than adults do.
Really good information. Dr. Makram, thank you very much for kicking things off for us. And if anyone has a question for Dr. Makram, please put it in the chat box and we will look at those at the end of our panel discussion. But for now, let's move on to our next panelist right now, Dr. Mike Ibarra, a sleep medicine fellow at the UR Medicine Comprehensive Sleep Center. He completed his neurology residency at the University of Rochester Medical Center. Dr. Ibarra grew up in a beautiful border town called El Paso, Texas. In his free time, he enjoys going to the gym, playing with his 2 cats, and hanging out with friends. And I'm sure, of course, getting adequate sleep every night as well. Dr. Ibarra, welcome so much. Dr. Makram just gave us some great insight into the research being done on the intersection of sleep, cardiovascular disease as well. So let's start with just your role at URMC, the sleep center there, and what you do to help us learn more about healthy sleep there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. How's it going, everyone? My name's Mike. And as mentioned, I like sleep. That's why I went into this fellowship. So my role is the sleep fellow. So I work at the University of Rochester. I did my neurology residency, the past 4 years, and I'm doing an extra year of fellowship here. So, a lot of people actually don't know what we do at the sleep center. It's kind of like a black box. And quite frankly, I didn't know until I started rotating here as a resident. And so the big thing to know is that sleep medicine, especially the clinic, it's a multidisciplinary team. And that's important because sleep it encompasses a lot of different fields of medicine. We have obviously, like myself, a neurologist working here, internal medicine, pulmonologists, like critical care doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, pediatric neurologists, ear, nose, and throat doctors. So it's quite extensive. And that's important because there's a lot of different aspects of sleep that need to be covered because we see a whole host of disease processes, and these can include, and I'll go into it later, but these can include like sleep disordered breathing, insomnia, hypersomnia, even just cardiac risk reduction management. And so our team is here to provide a multidisciplinary approach to address all these different issues. And it is a great field because you do learn a lot from different areas that you may have not been exposed to during residency.
Dr. Ibarra, can you walk us through, I think we've all heard the different stages of sleep, what happens when we fall asleep and then REM sleep and all these different variations of sleep. Can you walk us through anyone who's getting a proper night's sleep, what's happening throughout the night in terms of their sleep?
Yeah, so a good night's sleep. So when we sleep, so I'll start off in the beginning. So when all of us go to sleep, all our muscles relax and our airway relaxes too. And I'll tell you more about how that ties into sleep apnea. But we go through nice continuous sleep stages. So we start off in N1, which doesn't last too long. N2, N3 is actually the slow wave sleep. So people, I hear a lot of people call like REM sleep slow wave sleep, but N3 is actually the slow wave sleep. And there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of inflammation processes. There's a lot of growth happening during that time. And that's why when we're younger, we have much more N3 sleep and it sort of dwindles. And then once we get past the age of 60, it essentially goes away for the most part. That's why you see people that sleepwalk. It happens during N3 sleep. And that's why they grow out of it because it just dwindles as time goes on. So they truly do grow out of it for the most part. But REM sleep is the last sleep stage. It happens about 90 minutes after your sleep onset. And again, it's important for restorative sleep. And this is this is the sleep stage where nightmares happen. And so these sleep stages, they cycle throughout the night nice and continuously. So if you have anything, even like a obstructive sleep apnea that fragments the sleep, it's going to make it so even if you get a good, like a good 7 or 8 hours, it's just not going to be the same because it's not continuous. You're not going through these sleep stages.
And what happens, we talked about power naps a little bit with Dr. Makaram. So let's say people set their alarm. I'm going to get up in 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I'm just going to catch a quick cat nap and pop back up. You never hit that stage that you're referring to, the restorative stage. What happens when it's disrupted like that?
Yeah, so especially during the night when it's disrupted, you can have, people with narcolepsy, for example, and this is just an example. So narcolepsy is a condition where you switch between sleep stages really quickly. So it can lead to abnormal behaviors, or it can lead, because when we're in REM sleep, we should not be moving. The only thing that should be working are our eyes and our respiratory muscles. But if you have rapid shifts, that can lead to things like complex behaviors at night, and that's why it's important to make sure you get a nice continuous sleep, and you do address issues such as sleep apnea that can fragment your sleep because it can cause these issues, these abnormal movements, for example.
What would you say about sleep aids? Some people might use them, regularly, melatonin, different things like that. Are those helpful or should we avoid them?
Yeah, so it really all depends on what you're using it for. And it's important to consult your doctor because there are different uses for melatonin. So melatonin is a naturally occurring hormone and it primes your body to go to sleep. So it depends. If you're trying to use it to shift your sleep schedule sooner, you want to take it a small dose, 1 milligram, 3 hours before you want to go to sleep. And if you're trying to have a more sedating effect, we recommend a higher dose, 3 to 5 milligrams, 30 minutes before you go to bed. But it's important to note that melatonin, it's over the counter, it's not FDA regulated. So truthfully, we don't know how much melatonin is in a sold bottle. And so we always say if it is not effective, we do recommend getting a new bottle because, like I said, this is not FDA regulated. So we can't 100% sure say this is 5 milligrams of melatonin in this bottle.
You touched on this a little bit, but for people who are like, look, I'm going to bed at the right time. I'm trying to get my 7 hours and I'm just still not feeling rested. I'm not feeling like ready to pop up and take on the day. What should they do? Is that a point where they should go to a sleep center, where they should explore what's happening during the night a little bit more, why they're not hitting that good sleep?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon. People, obviously sleep hygiene is extremely important. And, we all, life happens. Some of us have to have our phone on, some of us are on call. And so we can only control so much. But if at the end of the night sleep, you wake up and you're like, I slept 7, 8 hours. I didn't really wake up a lot. And I thought it was good sleep, but I still feel terrible. That's the case that I would recommend you talk to your primary care to get a sleep medicine consult. Because one of the biggest processes we see in sleep medicine is something called obstructive sleep apnea. And so that by far is the most common thing we see. It's up to 1/3 of people in the US have obstructive sleep apnea, and that's just people that are tested. And so what that is so when all of us, like I said, when all of us go to sleep, we lay down, our muscles relax, and our airway tends to collapse. If we have a normal sized neck, air is going to get through. However, with obstructive sleep apnea, 40 to 60% of the cases are from either weight or just purely anatomy, anything that causes crowding in the airways. So it could be like a large tongue, low-lying soft palate, just excess tissue in the neck. So when people with obstructive sleep apnea, when they go to sleep, they already have less space to work with. So when their muscles do relax when they're sleeping, it's more likely it's going to close off. And that in itself fragments your sleep. And with that obstruction, you essentially stop breathing for several seconds. Sometimes, some people do it 30 seconds. It can be quite prolonged. And that in itself, your brain's going to panic. It's going to do everything it can to wake you up. So even if you don't realize that you wake up in the middle of the night, your sleep state, you're going to be knocked out of your sleep stages. You're going to be constantly working your way back up. And that fragmentation, it's going to make it so even those 7, 8 hours of sleep you get, it's not the same as a normal 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And the last thing I will say, this was touched upon, but I just want to reiterate. So men definitely they do have a higher risk of sleep apnea. However, once women go through menopause with the hormonal changes, it leads to usually weight gain, but also decrease in muscle tone, especially in the airway. So after menopause, the risk sort of equates between men and women. So it truly is a very common disease process.
You said 1/3 suffer from sleep apnea?
At least
That's an alarming
I
number.
suspect more.
Wow. And the treatment for it?
Yeah, so there are different treatments. I want you to think about what you've seen in all those movies about CPAPs and just forget that. That's not all right. We've come a long way. I can promise you that. But the gold standard treatment is a CPAP, and I promise you they are a lot different than they were like 10, 20, certainly 20 years ago. So a CPAP is a device that it it essentially it works by giving you pressure. So that pressure is going to keep your airway open, and that's going to prevent your airway from collapsing at night. And nowadays, I want to make sure, like, nobody should be scared of a CPAP because there are tons of different masks. It's not like the full face mask they used to have. There's like a mouth, a nose, under the nose, hundreds of different types. By far the most common and gold standard treatment. There's also things like oral appliances, surgeries nowadays for certain candidates, and even positional sleeping. If people say they have sleep apnea only on their back, then we do have strategies that people can try to sleep on their side. But it's important to work with your sleep doctor with this stuff. But yes, there are a lot of treatments and we can make it work.
Okay, good. And you said step one is to start with your primary care and then take it from there.
Yes, if you have not already had a sleep doctor that's established, I would definitely talk to your primary care because we would love to have you, or any sleep doctor would love to have you in clinic.
Okay, I guess I'll end with this last question for you, Dr. Ibarra. What are some things that some of us can start doing tonight to help promote better sleep for us?
Yeah, that's a good question. And some of it does have to do with sleep hygiene, but I'll say some of the most important things, probably the most, at least my personal opinion, the most important thing is consistency, making sure you have a very consistent sleep time, sleep onset and sleep wake up time. You want to shoot for 7 to 8 hours. You know, the amount of people that need less than 7 or the amount of people that need more than 9, it's so minuscule. I don't know if I've ever met anybody that needed that few or that much hours of sleep. The other thing too is if you do drink alcohol, reduce that because that can certainly make, yes, it makes you drowsy, but it also is going to fragment your sleep, make sleep apnea worse. But when you, like, even prior to going to bed, your pre-bedtime routine, you should give yourself about 30 minutes to wind down, do something that's not too stimulating. Like, don't watch like a wrestling match or something that's going to make you wide awake. Read something, listen to some soft music. Don't eat 3 hours. Try not to eat 3 hours prior to bedtime, and make sure you have a very nice, quiet environment. Like I said, no TikTok, none of those apps. Try not to use your phone unless you have to for work. And if you can't fall asleep or you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't fall asleep within 15 minutes, you want to get up, go to a different room and do something, read something boring, don't do anything stimulating, then go back to sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, you know, it's kind of tempting, but don't lay in bed on your phone and like just get out of bed, get as much natural light as you can. That is probably the best thing you can do for yourself. Be physically active. You want to make sure that you work your body so you can build that sleep pressure at night. And also no coffee past 2, 3. Try to limit your naps to less than 30 minutes. And again, no later than 2 or 3. But again, do I do all those things? Not every single one, but I do most of them. So you have to try and, do what you can, work with what you can.
Everything you listed, I don't do. So
well, you can tonight. You can start tonight.
Evening glass of wine, I guess. Dr. Ibarra, thank you very much. If you have any questions for Dr. Ibarra, please put them in the chat box. I know I've seen some pop up, so we will certainly get back to those right after we speak with our final panelist right now. Let's move on to Dr. Susie Mukherjee, very dear friend of mine. She's a lovely person. She's a cardiologist at Albany Medical Center, a member of Albany Med Health System, associate professor of medicine in the Division of Cardiology at Albany Medical College, and is the director of the Cardiovascular Diseases Fellowship Program. Dr. Mukherjee is a past president and current member of the American Heart Association Board of Directors in the Capital Region. She's a recipient of the Crystal Heart Award for her work in women's heart health. She's also been a member of the Founders Affiliate and Eastern States Regional Boards of the American Heart Association. Dr. Mukherjee has been the keynote speaker at several Go Red for Women luncheons across New York and regularly serves as an American Heart Association spokeswoman at public events and in local media. And she's so kind to speak with us whenever we are looking for a cardiologist. Dr. Mukherjee is from Syracuse, one of 4 doctors in her family, including her father and her sister, who are also cardiologists. Whew, that is quite the introduction, Dr. Mukherjee. You do it all.
Much, but thank you, everyone. Very kind of you, Sabrina. Nice to see all of you. Mike, I was listening to your sleep stuff, and all I'm thinking is, Sabrina, like you, I don't do that. I don't do that. And you said no coffee after 2. So what do we do about that 4 o'clock slump?
Right.
Day, and I don't want caffeine. So Mike, you and I have to talk. So I have some questions for you, but thank you for bringing up sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is something in my practice that I'm seeing more and more of, or actually I'm suspecting more and more of. So, you know, I do want to say, and I think this has been mentioned already by the panelists, that it's about the way the coordination is in the back of the throat, and it's always not about weight. So some people are like, oh, are you just asking me if do I snore at night because of my weight? There are thin people who have sleep apnea as well. And sleep apnea from a cardiac standpoint can lead to different heart rhythms, lower extremity edema, hypertension, which is a big issue for us, a big focus of what we do, especially for this Life's Essential 8. So thank you for bringing that into play, because that's so important. So I've been given the honor of kind of wrapping up everything that we've talked about, the Life's Essential 8, which, you know, it seems like it would be very intuitive, right? Hey, everybody, move more, eat better, don't smoke, get good sleep. You know, if you're diabetic, manage your blood sugar tightly, control your cholesterol, try to lose weight, and, you know, manage your blood pressure. So that's great, right? We can just say, let's tick off the essential 8, but those are words. Putting them into practice is so difficult. All right. Now, there's some of you, like some of my patients, you're just amazing. Like they just run every day. They get up in the morning, they get natural light. You know, they only drink their black coffee, if anything, you know, God forbid, I wish I could do that. And they have a healthy lifestyle. It's the way they roll. Then there's those of us who the minute we get home at night, I want to go to bed and I want to watch TV. I'll be very honest, I'm a Netflix girl. And that's usually how I fall asleep, which I'm not saying is the right thing to do, but healthy, you know, my job as a cardiologist, you know, yes, we talk about health, but I want you to prevent an event. My job is to not see you after the heart attack or after the stroke or after the bypass or telling you I need to send you for a stent or a valve replacement. I want to prevent the event, okay? And one of the things I think in heart health, you know, we really want to focus a little bit about blood pressure. Now, to talk about hypertension, all the other things we talked about matter, but let's focus on blood pressure for a moment. Blood pressure is a global pandemic. And the unfortunate or fortunate truth is that it's so easily, in some cases, treatable. Losing weight, low salt diet, you know, that sounds easy. It's not easy for everyone, okay? Hypertension, I also hate to break it to you, can be very genetic. I have young medical students who do the Ironman, they do the marathons, they're fit as a fiddle. And guess what? I have them on blood pressure pills. And it's hard for them to accept that because they're like, well, wait a second, I do everything right. You know, I eat healthy, I exercise. Why is my blood pressure up? It's genes. It's genetic. So look at your family history. You don't choose your parents. You don't choose your ethnicity. A lot of this stuff is built into things we cannot modify. There's modifiable risk factors and non-modifiable. We can't choose our parents, guys. All right, we can't. And that's okay. We love them the way they are. But They pass down things to us, and hypertension may be one of them. Now, I don't have high blood pressure yet, but my mother had hypertension in her late 50s, early 60s. So I know, and I'm mentally prepared to have hypertension as I get older. Okay. And that's okay. For me, I'm not one of those people who hate medications. That's the other thing. A lot of women, men too, but a lot of women, they don't want to take their meds. They don't want to take medication. Well, what else can I do? Well, what can you do to manage your pressure? Again, cut out the salt. Now, for someone like me, I love salt. Okay. I love tasty food. So that would be very difficult for me when the time comes. Lose weight. Well, that's a lot easier said than done, right? So I know you want to control it, but medications are not necessarily the enemy. It doesn't mean that I advocate, let's just throw a bunch of pills at you and you just take it. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking you to work as a lifestyle, diet modifications. You may need medications. Some of my cardiac patients need 3 to 5 different medications because they work together. So why is controlling your blood pressure is so critical? Well, I have a little model here, and Sabrina, can you tell me if you can see that?
Yes, yes.
So if you look at it, this is an artery, okay? This is an artery. Now, if you look at this pink lining inside, do you see that pink lining? That's called the endothelium. So we have miles of arteries in our body, okay? We have arteries to the brain, the carotid arteries. We have arteries to the heart, the coronary arteries, to our legs, to our kidneys, to our vital organs, to our private organs, to our legs. So it's like building a house. If you were to build a house and you put it and you see all the pipes going for the plumbing and the water, you know, we just don't put pipes to one bedroom. We put pipes to the attic, pipes to the kitchen, pipes to the basement. Think of your body as a house, miles of pipes. What's in those pipes? Water, air conditioned, cold water. What's in pipes for us? Blood, nutrients, oxygen, right? So here I'm going back to the pipes in our body. Do you think that high pressure inside all the pipes could be a good thing for us? No. We know from autopsy studies that we start getting, see, can you guys see the yellow streak in there a little bit? The yellow streak starts in our late teens. And we know this from Korean War, Vietnam War autopsies. Young men started to have streaks. What increases the likelihood of streaks? Hypertension, diabetes, smoking, obesity. So if those things are their teenage with all the obesity things that are going on, children's streaks may be worse before 19, okay? The fear is always that kind of plaque. And then you'll notice that that pink lining has been completely disrupted. Now it's all yellow, okay? But you can still see that I can see through it. So there's still blood flow that can get through that pipe. And then the fear is always the flow is limited. And look, there's no more pink lining. See that? There's no more pink lining. So what happens when you have a heart attack? So when you have a, here's a pipe, okay, again, cut open. So this plaque that's inside here ruptures open and the body tries to plug up the plaque hole, plaque rupture. But now look, there's the plaque, there's all the stuff that the body tried to do to fix that plaque, and now there's no flow. Okay, so that's your sudden heart attack. So to go back to blood pressure, I want your endothelium to be as healthy as possible. Okay?
Dr. Mukherjee, to tie this together to sleep, how many of your patients who are coming in with heart disease, with heart complications, how many of them say they don't sleep well at night?
Most of them. Most of them. I've never heard somebody come in and say, oh my God, I sleep like a baby. I have great sleep and I feel restored in the morning. Barely.
So you see a strong connection between obviously multiple lifestyle, diet, hereditary, but sleep is right up there with all of that.
Right up there. And not only is it up there, distorted sleep increases your blood pressure. And also don't forget, we have a natural rhythm in our body. So blood pressures tend to go up towards the morning anyway. Okay. So normally when we sleep, the blood pressure should come down, the heart rate should come down, but up and down, up and down. If you have untreated sleep apnea, the whole thing is dysregulated. And again, I'm going to go back to this. Dysregulated blood pressure is not good for the pipes. And oh, by the way, hypertension, the top number should be 120. Everybody wants to say, well, what about the bottom number? The bottom number, it's not that it's not important, but that's not what we focus on for hypertension control, unless the bottom number is very high. Okay, I want you guys to focus on the top number, and the top number should be 120 or below. So people who come in 138, 135, oh, it's okay, it's only high in the office. So if I may, I really want to talk about this for a moment, since I've been asked to speak on hypertension. White coat hypertension is not a benign thing. Studies have shown that white coat hypertension untreated has worse outcomes in mortality. The good news is, say you come and see me, your blood pressure, you're nervous about what I'm going to say, or I'm going to yell at you, who knows, and your blood pressure is 138, but you show me your blood pressures at home and they're 110, 120, because I already have you on medication, you do better than someone who's not on any medication at all. It may not be that I'm going to give you more meds because you're anxious, but if you're anxious in the office with me, then you're anxious with your road rage, you're anxious with a bad phone call, the blood pressure will go up and down throughout the day. You just don't know it because there's nobody taking it. So please don't misunderstand. White coat hypertension should be addressed at the very least and treated, in my opinion.
Dr. Ibarra touched on this as well, Dr. Mukherjee, about getting irregular sleep and how that affects us throughout the day. So if we are tired, and we may chalk it up to saying, I'm moody just because I'm tired, but here we are, have these ups and downs in our mood and our emotions all day. And that also is kind of touching on what you're saying here.
Sleep, health, stress and anxiety will bump up you. So we just said anxiety, white coat hypertension. What do you think that is, guys? That's stress. That's stress. So, people would be like, oh, she's just stressed out. Oh, I got a lot of things going on. Okay, well, you know what? What if I were to take your pressure when you're thinking about all the things that are going on? Your pressure's probably high. So anxiety elevates your heart rate, can elevate your blood pressure, can completely distort your sleep, of course. How many of us are lying awake thinking about everything we have to do, making a list? Making sure you get up early, checking your alarm 3 times to make sure that you set it. That's what I do when I'm on call. Or if I wake up in the middle of the night and I haven't heard anything, I'm like, oh my God, is my phone working? What if they tried to call me? So everyone, life is life. Life is life. And so we need to recognize that sometimes things that are going on are our friends and sometimes it's not, but we have the tools and we are empowered with knowledge to treat that. And just remember the pipes in the house. If I were to put some poison in one pipe in your home by the front door, do you think it's only going to go to the master bedroom? I always refer to the heart as the master bedroom. I don't know why. What about the attic? Stroke. What about peripheral vascular disease? What about the pipes down there? Blood pressure is not good for the pipes, period.
Dr. Mukherjee, stay on screen with us. I'd like to once again invite our audience, put any of your questions in the chat box right now. Dr. Makram, Dr. Ibarra, if you could join us back on screen and we'll do a little Q&A. I know we saw some questions popping up throughout our discussion today, and a lot of them were really good questions. So let's see what we have to send over to our panelists right now in terms of our first questions that are coming in.
Our first question is, when is snoring a concern that I should bring up to my doctor?
It's a good question. Dr. Ibarra, can you address that?
Yes, so the question is, when is snoring a concern that I should bring up to my doctor? So first, I will say that the main bedroom, I think, is the brain, not the heart, but that's agree to disagree. But back to the question. So snoring, yes, snoring is very common actually. And here at the Sleep Center, we want to make sure that we're not just on like autopilot. We want to think things through and make sure we treat what needs to be treated. And so some things that, would prompt me to recommend a workup for snoring would be certainly if you have things like cardiovascular disease, if you have like abnormal heart rhythm, hard to control blood pressure, diabetes, anything like that, any comorbidities, I would recommend getting that worked up. If you have associated symptoms with the snoring, for example, if you stop breathing in the middle of the night, if you wake up a lot, if you're just kind of tired throughout the day, and even things like you wouldn't expect, like if you have to urinate a lot at night, those can all be signs of obstructive sleep apnea. And also snoring, you know, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not uncommon that we get referrals because bed partners are disrupted by the snoring. So honestly, that in itself is enough to warrant a workup. So I would say those things would definitely, you know, something would like a light would shine and say, yes, please get that worked. But definitely if you have symptoms, other symptoms associated, especially like lack of energy.
You know, if I can just add, a lot of times when partners come into the office, they'll try to rat out their partner about snoring. And then they'll be like, yeah, and he stops breathing. I know he stops breathing in the middle of the night, or vice versa. So I agree with Mike, like the partner is so clutch in getting the history because they're the ones who are awake. They're the ones who are bothered by what you're doing. So it's great to get a history from a partner if possible.
That's a great point. Next question.
Any recommendations for addressing restless leg symptoms?
Yep. So the question is recommendations for restless leg syndrome. So there are a lot of mimickers for restless leg syndrome. There are things like neuropathy, even like peripheral artery disease that can all mimic restless leg syndrome. But in itself, restless leg syndrome can be actually very disruptive to just sleep in general. It can cause people to be awake for hours, or when they wake up, trouble falling back asleep. And so it's something to definitely talk to your primary care about because, you know, the most common cause of restless leg syndrome is iron deficiency. And so a iron test can really determine, you know, if you need iron repleted. And there are other factors too, like certain medications can actually cause restless leg syndrome, or they can just make it worse, especially some of these antidepressants like Prozac, stuff like that, that can absolutely cause restless leg syndrome. And even underlying, I know I keep going back to it, but even underlying like sleep apnea, I see that so common that can cause restless leg syndrome in itself. So I would definitely talk to your primary care because some things you can't, I mean, you won't know until you get like your iron studies tested. So that's a conversation I would definitely have with your primary care, especially if it's impacting your daily life, your quality of life, or just your sleep in general.
Our
Next question.
Why should you avoid too much sleep, and how do you know if you're getting too much?
Dr. Makram, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. So I will say that there is definitely much more research, I would say, on short sleep than there is on long sleep. With that being said, the reason that there is this upper cutoff now for long sleep is, if you remember from when I was speaking, even though we have less evidence on long sleep, it does seem actually that having long sleep can actually even be even more detrimental than short sleep when it comes to heart disease risk. I think the statistic that I gave was every hour above 9 hours increases heart disease risk by 12%, whereas every hour below the 7 to 8 increases heart disease risk by 6%. So we're seeing higher risk with sleep that is too long. I think that oftentimes, again, some of the explanations for this could be that people who have longer sleep also may have less opportunities to have to be physically active during the daytime, are more likely to be sedentary. There's also higher associations with some of the psychosocial risk factors that we see for heart disease, such as depression, for example. That seems to be correlated with extended sleep periods. So really the sweet spot seems to be those 7 to 8 hours a night. So I would say recommendation would be to cap at 9 hours. I will say though that long sleep is a much less prevalent problem than short sleep is. Most people actually have a harder time getting the recommended 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So we see less prevalence of long sleep, but when we do see it, it is more associated with I guess poorer outcomes.
I have a question. on the back of that. So when you say you should cap at 9 hours, is that assuming that you're having 9 hours of continuous sleep? What if you have sleep for 3 hours and you're up for an hour and then you go back to sleep? Like, does the 9 hours imply 9 continuous?
9 hours. So this all this research is referring to the main sleep period, which hopefully should be more than 3 hours. If someone, when someone is waking up every 3 hours, it means that the sleep efficiency and the sleep fragmentation is really high and they're having a poor quality sleep. And again, we go back to this idea of how we should look at multidimensional sleep health. So if you're getting 7 hours of sleep, but it's chopped up, so you're getting 2 hours, then you're awake for 1 hour, then you get 2 more hours. Most likely you will be having higher risk of high blood pressure and higher risk of heart disease because your sleep is chopped up. Because sleep duration is not the only thing that is influencing heart disease and its risk factors. And kind of to add to what you were saying about blood pressure too, you mentioned this natural variation pattern that we have in our blood pressure. And blood pressure also is supposed to dip at night, right? So in people who have poor sleep or fragmented sleep or are not getting enough sleep, this natural dip is either diminished or it doesn't occur. And that can really increase someone's risk of developing heart disease.
Yeah, I don't think we hear too often people saying, gosh, I got too much sleep last night, right? It's always, I didn't get enough sleep, I'm tired. What other questions do we have?
Are there suggestions for good alternatives to caffeine for the 4 p.m. slump?
There we go.
Some of my partners, go out and get a walk, go take a walk, go get a drink of water, drink a big glass of cold water. But for those of us who are in the office, we can't just go outside at 4 o'clock and take a walk. So sometimes it's just even walking around, just getting up from your seated position, brisk walking, even if it's for a few minutes. Some people will say do like 10 jumping jacks, get the heart rate up naturally and not with caffeine, because caffeine does tend to raise the blood pressure and heart rate at times. I always want to nosh around 4 o'clock too. That's the problem. I want to snack. I don't know if my co-panelists have, I don't know actually a distinct answer to that question.
I did want to jump in and say something that I always say is that consuming a cup of, think about it this way. When you consume 200 milligrams of caffeine, which is about a cup of coffee, at noon, there's still 15 milligrams of caffeine in your system at midnight, which is when you should be sleeping. So even if you're consuming, coffee at noon, you have caffeine in your system still at midnight. So it's really important to pay attention to kind of not consuming too much coffee during the daytime and, avoiding stimulants in general, close to bedtime. That also includes nicotine, by the way. Shouldn't be smoking in the 2 hours. We shouldn't be smoking in general, but especially not in the 2 hours preceding bedtime. I will say one thing that I kind of wanted to touch on is that diet and sleep work hand in hand. So it's really important to pay attention to that. And that can also help with that slump in the afternoon. So research is showing that there's like a vicious cycle between diet and sleep. So if your sleep quality is poor, it impacts your decision-making, and you're also more likely to consume an unhealthy diet in the daytime. In turn, this unhealthy diet, especially a diet that can be like high in fats and really calorie dense and can kind of also contribute to the slump in the afternoon, can then lead to poor sleep. So basically you enter this vicious cycle of like poor sleep, poor diet, poor sleep. So paying attention to the diet as well can help us not feel the slump in the daytime, but also can promote good sleep in the nighttime. So focusing on a plant-based diet, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats, it can be really important. What we call, I guess, a Mediterranean style diet.
You've always heard that turkey causes people to get tired, like avoid turkey at lunch. But I also think having a heavy lunch, if you're going out to lunch with your coworkers, don't have a very heavy lunch, because that will the blood goes to the belly to digest, and then you get really tired and sleepy. So light lunches, I think, also help in avoiding heavy carbs and heavy caloric.
And I'll just add one more thing. So be careful, because people tell me all the time, Well, my like parent or my friend, they actually drink coffee at like 9 p.m. and they can still fall asleep. So there is some truth to that. So coffee, so it's an adenosine antagonist, and so it's going to wake us up. But the studies were done on all patients, but everybody metabolizes the caffeine differently. Some metabolize it much quicker, some at a normal pace, some are a lot slower. So those people that do well, because my parents can drink coffee at like 10 or 11 p.m. and they're fine, but that doesn't mean it's going to work out for you. So that's why I would stay away from caffeine. And around 4 p.m., you know, the no napping, it's a general rule because napping, if it becomes longer than 30 minutes, it really cuts into our sleep pressure. So when we try and fall asleep, it's going to make it very difficult. If you tried a 15-minute nap at 4 p.m., I think you would be fine. It's just when you start getting closer to bedtime or you get longer than that, that's when it's going to really be cutting into your sleep pressure. Ideally, we shouldn't need to nap like so close to bedtime.
These are such good information pieces, especially as we hit that afternoon portion when I think a lot of us are going to start feeling that afternoon slump in about an hour or two. So just keep all of this advice in mind as you reach for that cup of coffee this afternoon and that bag of chips. Dr. Ibarra, Dr. Mukherjee, Dr. Makram, thank you so much for this conversation. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone listening in learned a lot as well. The registration and login information that you use today will give you access to all of the previously recorded webinars and Life's Essential 8 resources on the website. Again, it is www.heart.org/checkitny. And when this webinar closes, you'll be prompted to take a brief Check It Challenge survey. So if you could just please take a few minutes to complete that survey, it'll help the American Heart Association better understand your needs and allows them to prepare for this challenge every year. We really hope you enjoyed the 2023 Check It Challenge. Keep checking your blood pressure. Let us know what changes you made by tagging the American Heart Association at AHA New York or on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter using the hashtag #CheckIt. Everyone get a restful night's sleep tonight. And thank you once again to our panelists. Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the afternoon, everyone.